Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Conscious Grief Series 5. And today we are joined by Celia Conrad, who is a relationship expert. Welcome, Celia.
Thank you, Tara. Delighted to be here.
It's so wonderful to have you here. And you are also based in London, just a few miles away from where I am. So it's lovely to have a fellow Londoner here today and to talk about the work that you do, which, you call yourself a relationship expert, but you also are an expert in the field of grief as well. And you were a lawyer in a previous life. So you have a very interesting, career path. So perhaps you would like to share more about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Yes. So for my sins, I was a family lawyer for about 15 years. And obviously I dealt with a lot of breakup and divorce, which is a living loss, but didn't really think about it like that at the time. And really, I went from being a lawyer to a writer, research on family law matters. And then I ended up working in a bank dealing with vulnerable clients. But my sort of corporate career came to a halt when my brother got cancer, and I gave up my role to be his carer. And really, when my brother died, I decided I didn't want to go back into the corporate role. And his grief really impacted me. I mean, the grief that I had from when I lost him really knocked me for six. And the reason for that being is that I'd already lost another brother in tragic circumstances and both my parents, and come out of a really toxic relationship and hadn't really grieved for any of them. And so it hit me really hard. And I was thinking, why do I feel so bad? And it was because I hadn't processed any of the grief. And really that's when my journey started, thinking, how do I deal with this? So I didn't want to go back into the corporate world. And I thought, what knowledge do I have? What can I do to help myself and to help others, really? And I first off went and trained on the grief sort of counselling, grief educator side. And it was during that actual training that we were talking about all the different types of personal loss, and the relationship breakdown came up about, death of a marriage, end of a relationship, living losses. And I thought, oh, well, this is my background, right? So then I was obviously pursuing that as well. And then I wanted to help people move through that personal loss and out the other side, hence the relationship coaching. So really, I do the whole life journey. It's the stepping stones right through. But obviously, a lot of the work that I have is divorce, breakup, and bereavement. And it seems to be that's where my work has gravitated. So I want to help people get through that, move out the other side, and rebuild their lives. So that's really where I sort of have pitched myself. Feel very strongly about it. And then I was thinking about my time when I was at work and the things that happened to me, and also from the clients that some of the high performers that I'd worked with, how the breakup of their marriage or the death of a relative had really impacted them. And for me, when I was at work, I was told, well, it's fine that you've lost your father when you're at such a young age. Now you can get on with the rest of your life. That was the kind of attitude. Or when my brother died, it's like, well, you need to be here to deliver the goods. So I was thinking, wow, there needs to be a little bit more about, well-being in the workplace and how we actually address grief, personal loss generally. So that's really where I'm, putting all my sort of efforts to really make the change, or to actually raise awareness is the first thing, that they know that they need to do these things, and then help implement those changes.
Amazing. And how many days do people get for bereavement leave in this country?
Well, that's the thing. That's what's really interesting, because we don't have any mandatory policies. Some people might be 5 days, might be a few weeks. It depends. If you've lost a child, under the age of 18, then you'll get 24 weeks. It's really varied. And that's the thing. There's nothing there written in stone. So it very much depends upon your employer and what, and the size, of course, the size of the the operation where you're working, because in a small firm, if say it was 5 people and then somebody's away, then they've got to cover that person not being there. But in bigger firms, it's how do they, basically help their employees? What support is there for them? Where do they go? Who do they talk to? And also recognizing those signs, because so many people's coping strategies are different. Some people stuff their emotions down, they go into work, they don't tell people what's going on. So how does the employer find out? So there's loads of variables when someone has been through that personal loss and they're dealing with their grief in their own way, and not, no one really knows which is the best way forward. And that's one of the pieces of the puzzle where I try to help.
I think it's very common for people to want to leave their place of work as well during a bereavement, just because they don't want to have, like you say, the conversations with other people in the workplace.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting, actually, Tara, because very recently I was contacted by somebody on social media, and she had read one of my posts, and she was telling me that she was going to leave her job because she didn't feel she had the support. And it was really interesting because you read the statistics, and I think Sue Ryder talks about 5% who leave their job, but I think we have about 23 million people who obviously 23 million pounds or £1 billion is lost through obviously bereavement each year. And we've got about 24% of the workplace any one time going through a bereavement. And so that's about 8 million people. And if you think 5% of those people will definitely leave, that's a lot. And you've got all the people whose work performance drops, who are away, who are ill, who get depressed when these things aren't recognised. So, there's a lot that people may not be seeing, but it's happening.
Yes, I mean, it's amazing when you lay it out statistically, and as you so rightly say, grief is in a lot of these living losses as well. And
yes.
So many people are going through divorce and relationship breakups, and it can be very debilitating. And as you said, there are, certain things to look out for, like absenteeism, for example, or, underperformance. And what would you say, in terms of do you like to do one-to-one work with people in the workplace, or are you facilitating sort of groups or talking to the employer about how to speak or handle the situation?
All of those. And it really depends. So speaking to employers is really important to find out what policies and protocols they have in place to help people who are going through any form of personal loss, and if they have anything, whether those are sufficient and whether those are meeting the needs of their employees. Also going into an organisation and talking to the employees and finding out what they want, because everything starts from, grassroots level. So what do they feel would meet their needs in terms of the support? And then also train, if it's a bigger organisation, often training, say, line managers, because these are the people who will be dealing with, if you're running a team, you need to know your team, because, you've got key members of the team and someone's not performing, then obviously that's obviously a big issue for them, but obviously the knock-on effect for the team members as well, because they lose morale or they haven't got a key player. So that puts a lot of pressure on them. So there's that. And there's obviously, so you would coach probably line managers, but also, and train them, but also then offer one-to-one coaching for the employees, because that's a safe space for them to talk to someone who's not in the organisation, and they can open up about, what they're going through, and you can help them, go through those different stages. So it depends on, what they want, what their needs are. But basically, yes, all of those things. And I think it's really important as well, Tara, when you're, actually looking at the culture of a place as well. and the nature of the work they're already doing. So that's really important, you know.
Yes, because as you said, look, when you were in your corporate job, it's sort of like, well, sorry this has happened to you, but ultimately we have not really got the time to.
Yes.
And I think this is the problem with grief and our culture anyway, because we have, this obsession with efficiency, and
Yes.
grief is not an efficient thing. We don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know when it's going to debilitate us. We don't know when we're going to need to rest and lie down and do nothing all day. So it's a really it really doesn't match with corporate life, does it?
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't, because if you think about it, I mean, grief is emotionally and physically exhausting, as you just said, and you don't have the energy some days to get up and do anything, and you don't know which day that's going to be, because you might have a good day and think, wow, I got through to the next day, it will really hit you. And then if you do go to work, you're, present, but you're not present, that presentism thing, and you're not really being productive. And you might not want to be talking to anybody about it. So if people don't know, then they'll be thinking your performance is down. And then that puts pressure on you, because then you get agitated about, I'm not delivering. Mm. And so this is a cycle. It affects all these aspects of your well-being. If you think about it, you get depression, you could get mental health issues, you've got physical health issues, worries about money often, especially obviously, if people's died, you've got tax to pay, you've got things to sort out, obviously divorce is where am I going to be living, all those various things. And you've got those environmental factors of maybe moving home and all that, everything else, your social circle changes, everything. So there's huge changes, everything. Every pillar of your well-being is impacted by a personal loss. Mm-hmm. These are huge life events, aren't they? And they're so impactful.
Huge life events. And like you say, there's so much to, your own personal life really is a full-time job that you're trying to manage alongside
absolutely
work every day.
No, and I think if you think about, obviously in terms of bereavement, and if you're dealing with, I don't know how, even the fact that you have to do so many things as soon as someone has died, registering the death, these things are actually, you have only a few days, 5 days or whatever it is to do that. It's very overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And then you have to think about organising funerals, and then that's all very, very intense, and you're doing that, and that ends, and that's when, after that funeral, it's like, what happens now? And people go back to work. Some people, maybe they throw themselves into work. I always coped by overworking. It wasn't a very good thing, because it impacted me. I wasn't dealing with my grief. It impacted me hugely with physical symptoms that came out. So I know that's not a good thing. I got through the work, probably not, so I didn't have to think about other things, but it's not healthy. And as we know, stuffing down emotions isn't a healthy thing to do, but it's like, people don't want to break down in the middle of the office, do they, before they've got a huge meeting? So there's all those things. And time-wise, yes, I mean, you need time off work to do things. You have things to organise, and these can go on for months. And I had to deal with my brother's estate, which took a year. And it was very demanding. And I think that, that those things are not factored in. And it's like if you're going through a breakup, you have to go to court, you've got things to do, you've got issues with your children, you're not sleeping at night worrying about what's going to happen, where am I going to live, how am I going to pay my bills, what's going to happen, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's going to mean your focus will shift. And it's obvious, we're whole beings. We don't leave half of ourselves at the door to the office, or those personal issues. And people say that they do, but we don't. We do carry them with us, and they're going to be on our mind, especially when you've got very pressing issues like that you have to deal with. So, no, we definitely take all of ourselves into the office.
And when you work with clients, what, and you're even from your own personal experience, you said that you felt very depleted and you were, I'm imagining sort of some kind of burnout because you were pushing it down for so many years or months. And so how did that sort of manifest, and what are you seeing with your clients in terms of maybe physical repercussions or emotional?
Yes, I mean, I did. And for me, I think that's why I got diagnosed with an autoimmune condition afterwards, because I think it's how my body dealt with it, because I wasn't dealing with it and you suppress it and you're working and you're not dealing with it, you're ignoring it and you keep pushing through, pushing. And then suddenly, you can't push through anymore because something happens and it stops you from doing that. And it really impacted me. And I had to really think about my life in terms of what I was going to do for my health and well-being. So, I always say to people, 5 years ago, I woke up and I basically couldn't put one foot in front of me. That's what happened to me. And I had to make a huge change in my life in terms of, my health and sort of how I was going to work and how I was going to get that balance back. But I know a lot of it's because I didn't deal with the emotions. And, they have to go somewhere. And I think that's what we forget. We go, oh, I'm fine. Yes. And then suddenly something happens and they say, wow, why has that now happened to me? It's because we didn't deal with it. And I think I see it with clients as well, because they, obviously worn down, not sleeping, trying to deal with everything, trying to manage, putting a brave face on everything, and just to get through. And then there's the impact. They might be depressed, they don't feel well, chronic illness. And it's a pattern I've seen, not just with myself, but with my clients as well. So it's really impactful. So, we have to address it.
It is so impactful. And having an autoimmune must have been very scary at that point. And as you said, you were alone. You didn't have your parents, your siblings had both passed away, and you had just come out of a very toxic relationship. So I imagine that must have been a really terrifying time for you.
Yes, I think it's really interesting. I'm going to share this because I wouldn't normally, but I think it's really important. I do remember that the day when my brother died, and because my brother had also been cared for at home, and the district nurse came to see me, and I was just like, because I'd come back from the hospital, and I was almost like, you're numb, and you're just like, because when this happens, your world stops, doesn't it? The world keeps going, but your world stops. And I mean, I remember talking to him and he said, are you all right, Celia? And I'm going, do you know what? At this moment in time, I don't feel like I can go on. And he looked at me because I think he was, wow, what's she going to do? And I said, no, I'm not going to do anything, but I just feel right now that my life, where am I going to go with it? Because everything has stopped. And, I was exceptionally close to my older brother, and his loss is huge, and it's still huge. And it's like, I'm always going to feel that, I know that, but it's really, I think it's like when that happens to you, these are unimaginable things. You can't imagine until it happens to you. And then it's like, wow, everything changed in that moment. And, I changed because, I'm not the same person I was, because although that grief doesn't define us, it does change us because we're because of what's happened to us. But it's what we take from it, isn't it, moving forward? And I think my force now is to make that change, to help people who are going through that situation, and to help them. It's like we don't move on, do we? We move forward. And that's what we do. And we rebuild our lives. And that's what I want to help people do.
Yeah, and I remember you sharing with me when we first spoke about, and I hope I haven't got this wrong, but there was there was a way that you wanted to commemorate your brother was with a bench. Was that?
Oh, that's right. Yes, yes. So obviously, yes, we because my brother wanted to be buried, and there are. It's really funny when you go to the cemetery, you meet people who obviously who are going through, what you're going through, and you get to know them and you get to talk to them. And so we all want to get a bench. We still wait on our waiting list, but we have to wait. But we were going to do that because we thought it'd be nice to go and sit there. And it's not in a morbid way, but we have a common, we have this commonality again because we've all shared. We've all had a loss, and so we have that, as a community. Because it's the whole point about your grief being witnessed, isn't it? It's like, we do better when we have people to hear us and listen to us and to be with us in our grief, as opposed to doing it on their own. And that's something I've really learnt, because I've always tried to do everything on my own. I was like a lone wolf. I can do it. But now I realise that actually asking for that help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. So, if I need the support, I will ask for it now. And I think it's a huge lesson I've learned, that I had to also grieve.
Yes, no, it is. It's a real skill to ask for help. As I very much relate to being a lone wolf, and I think again, it's probably a little bit part of our Britishness too, to feel like we just, stay calm and carry on, and we can have the stiff upper lip and we can deal with it, and we're strong, and so it feels like a sort of weakness in a way, asking for help. And actually, it takes a lot of strength most of the time to ask for help. And just going back to your brother and his bench, just because I think it's a really lovely thing to do. And I know that, in London, in our parks, a lot of the benches have plaques.
Yes, they're memorial. Yes, they are, aren't they? Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's lovely because it is a way of keeping their memory alive. It's a way of mourning them and sharing our grief, which what you're saying about, validating grief and having it witnessed, it is an important part of the grieving process.
It is, and I never really thought about it until then, and it does. It is a lovely thing to do. And as you say, it's just bringing people together as well. And as you say, it's remembering, and that's really important. And I know that my brother wanted to be remembered. In fact, he made it very clear, I don't want to be forgotten. Hence the fact that he wanted to have his little plot on a path so people would walk past him and see him. He wanted to be remembered. So I think that's, and so the bench as well is a lovely thing to do.
Well, maybe you could share a little bit about your brother, about his name and the kind of person he was, because it's interesting.
Yes, so it's very individual. He was, so his name is Jerry, and he was a journalist. He was very proud of being a journalist. Knew everything about the 60s, total 60s addict, probably dressed like a mod, a haircut like a mod, the walking encyclopedia on all things 60, all things music. Hence, on his headstone, we have a little quote from Lennon and McCartney from one of the songs, which says, "How does it feel to be one of the beautiful people?" So very much, he was the sort of person you'd always take on a pub quiz because he knew everything. Politics, history, biography, very into pictures and photography. That was one of the things he started off in a photo library, so that he loved doing that. So, yes, a very, very interesting character. Everyone who says, "Oh, yes," he always has some little anecdote or quote to tell people. But I think he's sorely missed by his colleagues, which is lovely, and his friends, and obviously me. But yes, I think, and I think I talked about this once, I think on a video that I recorded and I put out there. And I said about, it's like when you have these shining lights, but they're lights still there still shines on. You know, the light is so bright that it doesn't go out. And I do feel that about him. I know I might say, oh, you're prejudiced because you're your brother, but seriously, he was like that. So I feel very fortunate that I knew him, that I had him in my life, you know, because my life wouldn't be as well rounded without him, because I've so many things because of him that I'm doing. And I started to do, obviously, before he died. So, you know, for me, that's very precious, and I want to keep that alive. And I actually do have, because he was very into the 60s, he was writing a book on pop art. So if there's anybody out there who knows about pop art, he was only halfway through the book, and I have his notes, and I don't know what to do with it, but I'd like to do something with it. So if anybody wants to collaborate with me to produce this book, that would be lovely. But yeah, because that would also be his memory as well. And he also used to write about lost pubs in Notting Hill. So that's something I need to I need to get published, because I have his columns, and it'd be really nice to make it into a book and a little map for tourists going around. So it's just keeping people alive. That's a way of keeping their memory alive. You know, we talk about that, don't we? And it's the meaning for us. And so that's, you know, that's very important. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. I mean, what a fascinating man. And
it was very, very interesting character.
absolutely. And I think it would be wonderful if you could continue his work in that way. And even you could even start with an Instagram page of Notting Hill pubs, and
That's a good idea. Yes.
extremely useful for tourists. And we have so many great pubs, you know, throughout the whole of London, and it's such an integral part of our culture.
Yes, and it would be nice as well to support, you know, to obviously to give some money to charity from it as well, to help, obviously, because Jerry had cancer, and to, you know, to support, obviously, you know, with that as well, to help others. So, you know, that would be a really good thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And yesterday was World Cancer Day.
Yes, it was. Yes, I was posting about that. Yes. And as it says, it was Jerry's anniversary was on Saturday. So it sort of tied in with yesterday being World Cancer Day. And obviously I'm here with you today. So it's, you know, it's interesting, fearful symmetry, isn't it?
I know, the timing of everything.
Yeah.
But it is, yeah, it's a wonderful testament to him, the work that you do, but also the relationship that you had and have.
Yes.
And, you know, a lot of the time, sibling loss they often call it, you know, the forgotten mourners of people. And yeah, the impact of that loss. Yeah.
Yes, and I it's true. And I find I've you know, and I've seen other posts about siblings who've obviously lost, you know, brother or sister, and you read them, and they're very, it's very emotional, because when you see that closeness of the relationship, and it's interesting, as you say, because it isn't something that people necessarily think about as much. And I was the youngest child, so, you know, I've always known my brothers to be around. So now they're not. And, you know, that I suppose, and interesting enough, when the oncologist said to me after Jerry died, and I said, I feel really guilty, I said to her, because I seem to be grieving far more for Jerry than I did for my parents and my other brother. And she was saying, oh, it's because you're last woman standing, she said. And it's like, now you've got all that, and it's come in, and then all the losses that you've had, it's this cumulative effect, isn't it? So suddenly it's, wow, they've all gone. And it's like, it's like, how can this be? And you think that about your siblings, because it's like, wow, you know, it's like in Victorian times, you know, children, you know, they died in infancy all the time, and, you know, people, it was almost like, oh, well, it's like, that's what happened. It doesn't happen now, and so not in this part of the world anyway. And so it's, you know, these are huge losses, and they're not necessarily thought of as much, particularly when you're that close. So yes,
you had a huge amount. a huge amount to grieve at one stage, and I can't, the impact on that would have been an awful lot.
Because I think Tara as well, because when my my other brother Trevor died, and obviously that was obviously a sibling loss, but I witnessed my parents having lost a child as well. So that impact, and I mean, every loss is heavy, isn't it? That's the thing. But I think it was interesting, the dynamic there, because the sibling loss and the parental loss, you know, and I think about it now and about my mother, when she obviously losing a child, obviously is not a natural thing for a parent. It's not the way it happens, is it? So, but I'm using my experience to help other people who are going through that, because yes, I wasn't in my mother's situation, but I can see the impact it's had on her, and also my father, because people expect men to be strong. When he went back to work, he was fun enough. That's another thing about well-being in the workplace, because he was told, "Oh, don't let it interfere with business now." And that was 1 week after my brother had died. So, and that's because he's a man, he doesn't have, I mean, I saw my father cry. So I know the impact that it had on him. So that's why I feel so strongly about it all.
Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense, and the world, fortunately, is changing in that. The grief, is becoming much more widely talked about, and people are more compassionate. I think are becoming more understanding of it. But
yes.
Yeah, so I can imagine very much still in those corporate scenarios. I never really ended up in a terribly corporate setting myself, but that those were, it's a bit like chop chop. We don't have time for this.
Yes, I mean, I'm comforted in a way by the fact there's a lot more emphasis on well-being and on mental well-being, and I use that as an entree, because this will also impact your mental well-being if it's not addressed.
Yeah. Mental and physical.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, everything: mental, physical, emotional, psychological, I mean, environmental, social, spiritual, right? It's everything. All those pillars of well-being are impacted.
Yeah, so it is really important work to be an educator in that corporate space, as you're doing, which is wonderful. And I always think, with conscious grief, more people who understand about grief, the more compassionate we hopefully can become. And actually, that's always a question I like to ask people,
yes,
how you would define conscious grief.
Yes. So for me, and I was thinking about this because I knew you'd ask me this question. So I was thinking, well, I think it's about being with it. So it's like, and from my own experience, I would say, be with it, be present to it, acknowledge it, don't stifle those feelings down, express them, and reach out for support.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Celia. And you have a lovely free gift for people, so perhaps you can tell us about that as well.
Yes, so I've called it First Steps to Healing. It's basically a free 1 hour session with me. You can talk about anything, personal loss related or relationship related. And there's keeping that offer open up until the end of March. So for anyone who wants to book with me, I'd be delighted to have a chat.
Amazing. Thank you, Celia. And that will be March 2024, just in case you're watching.
Yes, thank you.
It has been really wonderful to be with you again, Celia. And I will just offer you the opportunity if there's anything else you'd like to share before the end.
Yes, I would just say, for everyone here, obviously, do watch the whole of this series, because there's so many wonderful experts going to be on here. And do get Tara's book. She hasn't asked me to do that, but do, because she's been in this space for such a long time and she's got so much to give, and she gives so much anyway. So I would just like to say, just to everyone, just be with that grief and reach out for support, and know that there are people out there who want to help.
Bless you, Celia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who's been watching or listening today and sending lots of love. Bye.
Bye.